Hi everyone, welcome back. The topic for today's discussion will be compartment syndrome, which is another important exam topic. Compartment syndrome is more common in the forearm and in the leg, although it can happen in any part of the body. To understand the compartment syndrome proper, you should understand the anatomy, and the anatomy of the limb when seen in the cross section will be like this. The outermost layer is formed by the skin. The layer underneath is the fascia. This orange layer or the fascia is the most important structure to understand compartment syndrome. It is an inelastic structure. That is, the fascia in the forearm and the leg does not stretch. Although the skin can stretch and accommodate bleeding underneath, the fascia will not stretch, and so the pressure inside the fascia builds up inside as the fascia cannot stretch. This is the basic concept which you have to understand. Beneath the fascia are the muscles, and the muscles have capillaries within the muscle that supplies blood supply and the nutrition to the muscle, and the innermost is the bony structure. The other two important structures are the neurovascular structures. These green structures are the nerves, and the red structures are the blood vessels, that is, the arteries and veins. So, this is the anatomy which you have to understand compartment syndrome. Now, coming to the pathophysiology of why and how a compartment syndrome occurs. Now, whenever the bone fractures, as we have seen in our previous videos, there is stage of bleeding and there is stage of inflammation. So this bleeding and inflammation caused by the bony fracture causes edema within the limb. This edema increases the pressure within the compartment. And as we have seen previously, the fascia or the orange structure is inelastic, and so although edema is there within the compartment, the fascia cannot stretch to accommodate the edema, and the bone within is also hard and it is also inelastic. So, as both the inner and the outer layers of the compartment are inelastic, but the bleeding and inflammation happens, the pressure increases within the compartment, and this increase in the pressure in osteophyseal compartment is called as compartment syndrome. And as the pressure builds up and the fascia and the bone are inelastic, the next structure which accommodates or responds to this pressure is the muscle, and the muscle undergoes pressure and compression. Once the muscle tissue undergoes compression because of the increased pressure within the osteophyseal compartment, the capillaries within the muscle also gets occluded. So once the capillaries that supply the muscle are occluded, it results in muscle necrosis. So this muscle ischemia and necrosis happens within 4 to 6 hours of compartment syndrome. This is an important step because compartment syndrome has to be treated before this muscle ischemia occurs. That is, treatment has to be within 4 to 6 hours to prevent muscle necrosis. So, once the muscle necrosis happens, this muscle necrosis further causes inflammation, and this inflammation further increases the pressure, and thus it becomes a vicious cycle. That is, further muscle necrosis, further edema, and further increase in the osteophyseal compartment pressure, and the compartment syndrome becomes worse. So, once there is further increase in this pressure, the neurological structures gets affected in the next step, and nerve necrosis occurs in 12 hours. So when 12 hours happens, the nerves die. And finally, the arterial and the venous system collapses, resulting in gangrene. So, this is the pathophysiology of compartment syndrome. That is, bony fracture causing edema and inflammation, which increases the pressure within the osteofacial compartment. This increased pressure compresses the muscles and the capillaries within that, and this occlusion of muscular capillaries causes muscle necrosis within 4 to 6 hours, which further increases the pressure, and this further increase in the pressure causes occlusion of the vessels and the nerves. So once the nerve gets damaged, it has a capability to regenerate to a lesser extent, so the nerve injury might recover. But the most important aspect here is the muscle, because once the muscle necrosis happens, the muscle never recovers to its pre-injury status. This muscle is later replaced by an inelastic fibrous tissue, and this inelastic fibrous tissue replacement of the muscle results in the classical Volkmann's ischemic contracture. And the picture given here shows the classical picture of an Volkmann's ischemic contracture of the forearm, which happens because of a neglected compartment syndrome. All the muscles are fibrotic and the fingers will not be able to be used for any type of activities. So if the compartment syndrome is not identified and treated properly, it will result in Volkmann's ischemic contracture. Now coming to the causes, the commonest site where compartment syndrome can happen is the forearm, and the injuries in the forearm that can result in compartment syndrome are fractures of the radius and ulna, distal end of radius fractures and wrist fractures, and elbow injury, of which the commonest is supracondylar humerus fractures. So these traumatic fractures of the forearm can result in hematoma and compartment syndrome of the forearm. The next site where it is common is the leg, that is proximal 1/3 fracture of both bones of the leg, like tibial condyle fractures, which can cause compartment syndrome of the leg. The other general causes are circumferential burns and application of a tight plaster cast. Both the burns and the tight cast will cause an inelastic component surrounding the skin, and this results in pressure building up within the compartment, causing compartment syndrome. Another cause is arterial reperfusion in an arterial injured limb and severe crush injury. So these are the causes of compartment syndrome. Now coming to the clinical features, the classical clinical features of compartment syndrome are 5 P's, that is pain, paresthesia, paralysis, pallor, and pulselessness. So these are the 5 characteristic features of compartment syndrome. Pain because of increased pressure in the compartment. Paresthesia and paralysis is because of the affection of the nerves and the muscles within the compartment. Pallor and pulselessness is because of affection of the capillaries and blood vessels within the compartment. So these are the 5 classical features, of which paralysis, pallor, and pulselessness are the very late features of compartment syndrome, and we should not wait for these 3 features to be established to diagnose compartment syndrome, because if we allow the patient to develop these 3 symptoms to diagnose compartment syndrome, then it is not a proper way to diagnose. So the compartment syndrome has to be diagnosed only when pain and paresthesia is there and before the patient goes into paralysis and pulselessness. Pain is the characteristic symptom of compartment syndrome. This is the earliest feature, and the characteristic feature of pain is that it is excruciating and it is out of proportion to the nature of injury. There is a classical stretch pain, which means When the muscles of the involved compartment are stretched passively, the patient will shout with pain. Like for example, in forearm, when you are testing the flexor compartment, when you extend the fingers, you are passively stretching the flexors of the forearm and the patient will have severe pain. Similarly, when the toes are passively dorsiflexed, the patient will have severe pain in the calf region because of compartment syndrome. So this stretch pain and the character of the pain has to be checked repeatedly every 15 to 30 minutes when you suspect compartment syndrome following a trauma. The next classical feature is the presence of these blisters. These blisters should make you think of compartment syndrome because they indicate that the skin layer is losing its blood supply, causing these blisters. Presence of distal pulse does not exclude compartment syndrome. This is one thing you have to understand in this whole presentation. If radial pulse is present, it does not mean that there is no compartment syndrome. And if dorsalis pedis pulse is palpable, it again does not mean that there is no compartment syndrome. Because as I have told you earlier, arterial collapse is the last step in compartment syndrome. And if you wait for arterial collapse and loss of pulse to happen, that means you have missed the bus and it will result in gangrene. So presence of distal pulse does not exclude compartment syndrome. The prerequisites to understand and to identify the clinical features that I have mentioned earlier is you need a conscious patient to say that he's having excruciating pain and to say that he's having stretch pain. And second, there should not be any regional anesthesia given for pain. Like for example, when there is an upper limb fracture, a brachial plexus block should not be given immediately before examining for compartment syndrome because in an unconscious patient and when a block is given, although compartment syndrome features are present, these two things will mask the symptoms and the diagnosis of compartment syndrome will be delayed. So in these cases, that is when an unconscious patient is there and when regional anesthesia has already been given to a patient and you are suspecting a compartment syndrome, it is not possible to diagnose it with clinical features. And in this scenario, you have to measure what is called as the compartment pressure. Here, a needle electrode is introduced into the damaged compartment and the pressure within the compartment is monitored. This measurement of compartment pressure, when it is more than 40 millimeters of mercury, or when the measured compartment pressure, when the diastolic blood pressure is subtracted from the measured compartment pressure, the difference in pressure when it is less than 30 millimeters mercury. That is, when the measured compartment pressure is more than 40, or when the difference between the diastolic and the compartment pressure is less than 30, it indicates that there is an increased pressure within the compartment and surgery has to be done in these values. Now, coming to the management, the important point that you should again understand is compartment syndrome is purely a clinical diagnosis and it is not based on investigations. So once you clinically diagnose compartment syndrome based upon the clinical features of pain, stretch pain, excruciating pain, and paresthesia, the first and foremost step is you have to release all the constricting elements around that limb. It can be a cast, it can be a bandage, or it can be a dressing. Whatever it is, the dressing, bandages, and cast has to be removed completely from the skin, and then monitoring of the pain, sensation, and compartment pressure has to be repeated after a duration of 15 to 30 minutes. If there is no improvement in symptoms, even after removing the constricting elements after 15 to 30 minutes, then it is an indication of urgent surgery. And the word which you have to remember in surgical management of compartment syndrome is fasciotomy. Now, what is fasciotomy? As we have seen in our previous picture, this is the compartment with the fractured bone and collapsed arteries, nerves, and muscles with increased pressure within the compartment. Fasciotomy is you are opening up the fascia. You make two incisions on the involved limb at the level of the skin and fascia, extending throughout the length of the forearm and the leg. Once the incision is made through the skin and fascia, all the pressure within the compartment gets released and the muscles bulge out once the pressure is released. So the muscles expand, the capillaries within the muscle open up, the nerves and the arteries pressure are released and they open up, and the pressure within the osteofacial compartment decreases. So when this fasciotomy is done within a period of 4 to 6 hours from the time of injury, you can definitely prevent muscle necrosis, and the patient has chances of recovery of the muscle function in a better way. But after 4 to 6 hours, even if you do a fasciotomy, the chances of muscle recovery is very less, and the muscles will be replaced by fibrous tissue, and it can lead to Volkmann's ischemic contracture. So now this is a clinical picture of fasciotomy of the leg, where two incisions are made, one on the lateral side and one on the medial side, to release all the four compartments of the leg. The incision has to be made throughout the length of the limb, and the pressure has to be released by opening both the skin and the fascia. This is the incision that is made in the forearm and hand for a compartment syndrome of the upper limb. So once you make the incision, because of the increased pressure, the muscles start bulging out. So you should not only release the skin and the fascia, the next important step is you have to identify the muscles that are necrosed, and the necrosed muscles should be excised, because leaving the necrosed muscle within the surgical site forms a good medium for the bacteria, and it will result in infection. So all fasciotomy should also include debridement of the necrosed muscles. The necrosed muscles are identified by its pale color, loss of contractility on touching, and loss of bleeding on cutting the muscle fibers. So the fasciotomy should involve incision of the skin and the fascia throughout the length of the limb, along with excision of the necrosed muscles. So this will definitely leave a gap, and the skin cannot be sutured primarily. You have to do a re-exploration after 48 hours to see whether there is any further necrosis of the muscle. And if there is no further necrosis of the muscle, then a plastic surgeon opinion has to be obtained for coverage of the fasciotomy wound, either with a split skin graft or a flap, depending upon the status of the wound. Now, to summarize, whenever you suspect compartment syndrome by the presence of excruciating pain and stretch pain, you have to release the dressings and the circumferential cast till the skin and maintain a normal BP for a proper blood flow. Once the dressings and the compressive elements are removed, you have to re-evaluate the stretch pain and sensation after 15 to 30 minutes. If still the stretch pain and excruciating pain are present, then the patient needs an urgent fasciotomy. It is an emergency procedure. The other scenario, when the symptoms of compartment syndrome cannot be identified as seen in those who are unconscious, or in those regional anesthesia has been given masking the symptoms, you have to measure the compartment pressure. And when the absolute compartment pressure is more than 40 millimeters of mercury, or when the difference of compartment pressure and the diastolic pressure is less than 30 millimeter of mercury, again you need an urgent fasciotomy as an emergency procedure. So in fasciotomy, you release the skin and fascia throughout the length of the limb, and the necrotic muscles are debrided and the wound is left open. Re-exploration is done after 48 hours to see whether there is any further necrosis, and the necrosed muscles are again debrided, and then a plastic surgeon consultation is obtained for wound coverage with either a split skin graft or a flap depending upon the status of the wound. Hope you have understood this compartment syndrome. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe this video to others so that it will be useful for them. Thank you.